Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Welcome back to the Advancement Podcast. Hey, if you enjoy what you're listening to, if you can click subscribe wherever you're listening to.
Yeah.
I always mess up one intro a day on whatever podcast you're listening to. That way the content comes to you every Tuesday and Thursday. If you could also rate us on the podcasting platform, it would help us spread the word about advancement. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, click subscribe, or Facebook. I am Todd Barham, the host of the Advancement Podcast, here, as always, with my ADD compatriot, Tim Ware. How you doing today, Tim?
I'm ADD.
Yeah, we both are. Let's put two ADD guys in a room to do a podcast. This is good.
Well, one thing's for sure, we've got the energy to keep it going.
That's true.
That's
we
right.
can go all day.
Well, I don't know. People think sitting behind the microphone, that'd be easy.
It's easy. Yeah. We found that we can do 3 episodes very well.
4 if we need to, but once you start
once you get past 4, we're like, we're not any good.
With the previous host who was with me, when we would do batch recording, we would do 6. Oh, but at the end of it, you are brain dead. Oh my Lord. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So we're not doing that.
Yeah. We'll just do 3, maybe 4 today.
3, maybe 4 today.
We're on number 2.
Number 2.
So, all right. So you're not watching any sports at all?
No,
None.
I'm not.
You haven't turned anything on?
No.
Okay.
I'm not. I see it when I'm in a restaurant. That's it. I'm not watching any sports.
So if the Houston Astros make the World Series, you're not going to watch?
I did hear. They're
doing good, actually.
I was shocked. I heard that they were going to do the World Series. They were talking about doing it in Dallas. Rachel told me this.
They're not talking about it. They're doing it.
I know,
but
yeah. She says they're doing it. And I said, no, the World Series is played where the teams are. You don't do. And she's like,
Tim, this is a good intro for our gerontology session. Tim is very stuck in his ways, and he can't handle having a World Series with the DH in a bubble city. People are dying, Tim, of COVID, and you're worried about sports.
There are a few things COVID just broke because there was no sports. I just was I went into rehab and I decided I didn't need them anymore.
Into rehab.
COVID broke my sports addiction. There was none to watch.
You heard it here, Dr. Claunch. Tim went into rehab.
And but what happened after that, was they started restarting things. The fact that and I know Susie's husband is a baseball coach, so when they
not a coach, he's in sports information.
Oh, sports information. That's right.
Oh, he's the smart guy behind.
Not that to get out.
Yeah.
When I was when they decided that they were going to go all DH across the board,
he was out.
I was out. It's waste of we're not going to get into and it has nothing to do with being traditional. It has to do with the way the game is played. But the essence of the game. But we'll go on from there. It's good to have with us today. We're continuing our conversation on aging in ministry. Dr. Suzie Macaluso. I always like saying your last name, Macaluso. Macaluso.
Did I ask you this before? Is that Italian? Correct.
It is.
Okay, that's what I thought.
We love Italian.
Yeah, I love Italian food. I love Italian food.
Yes. Now she's not her husband is the actual Italian, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm French. My maiden name is Fournier.
Oh,
Fournier.
I do like French food too.
How did the podcast? This is not. We're not on a Food Network here.
I'm always good for a good baguette and a lobster bisque. French food.
Oh my! Well, it's good to have you back with us, Dr. Suzie. Dr. Suzie is head of the gerontology department at Abilene Christian University. She has a her PhD and is a brilliant young lady. She's been with us multiple times, and we're talking this.
She's
this
approaching her 100th episode with us.
no, we're on the other side of the 100th episode.
I know, I'm joking. She's done 100 episodes with us. Never mind. Forget it. It's a bad joke if you have to explain it.
Yeah, I didn't get that joke at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got it. I thought it was funny.
Thanks.
Okay.
Millennials unite.
Anyway, well, now I guess that was a millennial joke because I did miss it. But anyway, so I'm sure there will be comments on that now. But
you can email Tim at tim@advancement.cc.
That's true. You can. Anyway, we're talking. Wow, we're talking about aging in ministry. And last time we had a great discussion. If you didn't listen to it, you ought to go back and listen as we talked about
do it now.
The tension in ministry of calling and the identity that goes with being in ministry that keeps us often from, as leaders, from stepping into a retirement time, and more importantly, from stepping aside and making room for others to lead. Which when COVID went down, that just affected everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But as churches were coming back, I have a friend who is probably 15 years older than me. So that puts him in his mid-60s, still pastoring. Been pastoring this same church for 25 years. And he made the comment as they were coming back, and he's in good health. I'm not saying he's not in good health. I mean, we age better today than we did some time back. But he said,
sometimes we live too long and it's bad. But
yes, that's a whole another discussion,
yeah.
Todd.
Sorry, I went too deep there. Sorry, Tim.
But he made the statement, Dr. Suzie, to his congregation at the reopening, as he was talking about if you're at risk, who to come and who not. And he said, but this is who I am. God called me to do this, and I'm going to do this until I die. I'm going to pastor this church. And I understood the sentiment behind it, but when I heard it, honestly, it grieved my heart, because it also said, I'm not going to make room for anyone to reach another generation here.
I like you, I understand the sentiment, because we face a similar issue in academia as faculty. I mean, it's not a super, physically taxing job, so we can do it as long as our minds stay sharp. And, it's like I said in the last episode, we talked about identity, right? But it's also, one, it's a little arrogant to think that no one can do it better than you. But two, wouldn't you rather kind of go out on a high note?
Wow, that's shot across the bow right there.
I thought about this in the last episode. We're planning a series coming up down the road on leading in humility, because I think that you just hit on something that oftentimes, whether we want to admit it or not, as pastors, because people put us on those pedestals and they won't let you come down, and this becomes your identity. Sometimes I think can easily become a very arrogant group.
Yep.
Yeah.
We know the scripture better than you. We know what God said. I have the word from the Lord. He talks to me.
Well, I think also, you can certainly connect with younger people well into your 60s and 70s. There's nothing to say that an older pastor can't reach young people, but you also don't want to get into this false sense of superiority to where you're being pushed out. It'd be better to kind of leave on that high note of being in the prime of your career and in the prime of kind of your ability to share the gospel, and to kind of turn into a mentor or a kind of a behind the scenes person, or transition your ministry out of the pulpit and into something else, maybe something more grassroots. Maybe it is working with younger people. Whatever that might be, you can still fulfill that calling outside of that pulpit.
So you just has there been research done that you're aware of on this departure side? Because are we finding that more pastors are just are more pastors staying until the churches are basically at a point of where the churches died with them, with their ministry, or are they being pushed to, or are they actually being pushed out and in a revitalization effort?
Yeah, so I don't know which is more common, but there are kind of, in my view, there's kind of three ways this can go down, right? There's the conscious kind of plan of succession, if you will, where a successful church that's growing, that's doing all the things that mark success for spiritual development, kind of has an associate minister in place. And then there's a slow transition where they kind of flip roles, right? And then the person,
even those I've seen those, and I've seen where the pastor, where all that was done and everything, but the pastor would hold on just and were bored if I had to finally step in and say, okay, this transition is done and you're out.
Yeah, so that would be kind of the second one, right? Where there's a pastor who, for whatever reason, either because of their identity, they're having a difficult time disengaging from that role, or they just, this is their calling. This is what they want to do forever. And so they just keep on doing it. And the church kind of has to, the other leaders of the church come together and are kind of like, it's time. And if you're not going to do that gracefully, then you're going to be basically fired. That's hard. That's rough on any church. That's not something you want your church to go through. No. And then the third is the hanger on.
In your research on that second one, some of those are internal congregational decisions. And what percentage do you think are internal congregational decisions versus denominational or movement, those types where denominational leadership are the ones that come in and say it's time?
I mean, I think that really is denomination specific, because some denominations have much tighter control over their pastoral staff, where they're more assigned than selected. So I would say that it probably depends on the denominational polity. So the leadership structure in the denomination. Obviously, in my experience in Churches of Christ, it's all congregational. There is no overarching authority figure. And I would say that's true of probably a lot of evangelical traditions, versus mainline tends to be more of the denominational led. And then that third is kind of this idea of the pastor and the church decline together, and then they die out, and kind of those new pastors trying to come up end up planting new churches. And they might get financial support from this dying congregation as kind of their last hurrah, but there's no kind of intergenerational work being done. It's kind of like, okay, well, we're going to do our thing. You young people can go start something over here. And to me, that's very unfortunate when that has to happen.
Yes, it is. I mean, of course, we had when we had you on previously, and we talked about connecting generations in our congregations. We really wrestled with some of that, because this third option of the dying congregation, with a leader just leading it till he can lead no more, and the congregation going with him. But at that stage, most of these congregations are in older facilities, and with most primarily an older demographic and very little energy, and dare I say, by that time, their reputation as a force for the kingdom in their community is at best absent, negligible, when at worst they bring they leave a bad taste in people's mouth.
Mhm.
Let's say that as gently as I can.
Let's take a moment and hear a word about advancement.
This is Brian Hyatt, lead pastor at Cornerstone Church in Rowlett, Texas. I'm so thankful for the relationship that I have with Tim and the entire advancement team. Tim has invested in Cornerstone and myself, and we have seen tremendous results. Our attendance and giving are up 20 to 25% since we implemented the key strategies that he brought. Advancement has also helped us develop leaders so we have a more balanced team approach to ministry. For more information, please go to www.advancement.cc. You won't regret it.
Now let's get back to the podcast.
So these three things, obviously a place where you leave in a healthy way and there's a healthy succession, whether it be a new pastor coming from the outside or someone in staff on the team moving up, that is obviously the probably the preferred way of doing these things.
Yeah, I mean, a congregation that I was a part of in Indiana, our preaching minister was getting older. He was still a fantastic preacher. He was still very engaged in ministry, but he and his wife decided that it was time for him to end his time as a preaching minister, and he actually ended up working for World Christian Broadcasting, doing some fundraising and kind of using his gifts and talents in that way. And he worked for another 10 years doing that before retiring in his late 70s. And they brought in someone from the outside and kind of they co-preached for a few weeks to kind of ease the transition. And it was, to me, an excellent model of what this should look like and what this can look like for a healthy, vibrant congregation.
So when there's three different ones here, these different pieces, one of the challenges for those of us in ministry is it's always easier I shouldn't say always, but most of the time it's easier to recognize the signs, the symptoms from the outside than from the inside,
Yes.
Whether it be in the congregation or from within yourself, because we always think we've got a little more than sometimes we actually have. And so what are the signs that we could be looking for in ourselves that as a leader, Todd's 35, he's a long ways from it, but I'm in my 50s. As I start pushing towards these next few years, what are the things that I could be looking for, saying, okay, these are some things where I need to start looking to, I'm coming to the end. What are some of those indications that we find in the research?
So I think one of the keys here is being able to recognize your thoughts and to be able to really interrogate what's going on within you. And that takes practice, meditative practices, but being able to recognize any sort of resentment thoughts about your current work, any of those kind of self-deprecating thoughts about the things that you're doing and your value and worth, and then also doing some work to separate the identity out. So a lot of the writings of the early kind of monastic orders talk about kind of decreasing your identity to the smallest possible identity that you can have, that allows you to live in the moment and to just be more aware of who you are and kind of your relationship with God. And so trying to kind of look at all of those things that you think of as your identity and trying to imagine what life would be like without that, right? If I weren't a professor, would I still be Suzie? Yes, I would. I would have to figure things out. I would have to kind of figure out my new passions and what I wanted to do with myself, but I would be me, right? Even as a mother, which is a huge part of how I think of myself, if I weren't a mom, if something happened, would I still be me? Would I still be in relationship with God? And so trying to strip away all of those other things and think about who am I who am I really? And I think that's really about our relationship with God, and where does God want us? That we don't get to choose where God wants us. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done on kind of identifying those thoughts of resentment and stripping away those pieces of identity. And kind of once you've done that work, it should be a lot easier to disengage. That doesn't exactly answer your question, but I think it really is about listening to yourself. Are you truly fulfilled in what you're doing, or are you putting on a show?
As you were speaking, in that what you said, I don't know if you answered my question. I wrote down that really it's about finding a place of humility. I'm just struck by the fact that last time and now again in this episode, there's this piece of being able to step aside from ministry. There's a place of there's really a humility component. Last time, I mean, we already used the word arrogance, and if you're a young leader listening to us, we don't want you to quit listening just because we want this to be this series of episodes be something that helps you too. And what I have a heaviness in my heart right now, Suzie, over this idea of humility. We live in a society, and those in your generation, the millennial, the Gen Z, you're raised in a me-centered world where I have a voice, I matter, my thoughts, where humility is even harder. We're raised in an arrogant America to be an arrogant people.
Mm-hmm. And that's not scriptural.
It's not.
That's not the biblical model. And so I think for your younger listeners, if you can be aware of that early on and be thinking about that identity early on and working through that, then it's going to be less work when you're in your 50s and 60s, because you're going to have that plan in place that we talked about. Of I have something I can do, because this isn't the only thing that defines me.
Well, I think if we look into the Gospels and we look at the pattern of Jesus, he led with enough humility that we see that the disciples are baptizing, the disciples are feeding, the disciples are healing the sick. He's sending them out. He's not threatened by their success. But I think is oftentimes in ministry, as a senior pastor, as a lead pastor, as even as a youth pastor with staff people under you, whatever it is, we get into these roles and we get threatened by the success of our subordinates, which in itself is a symptom of, we could call it insecurity, but that comes back to a lack of humility anyway.
Yeah, and it's part of it is social comparison, right? This idea that my value is in comparison to other people's value. But that shouldn't be where our value comes from. The yardstick is not other people. The yardstick is Christ.
Yes.
And so the only social comparison we should be doing is ourselves to Christ. And so we should be excited when other people are successful. We should be encouraging, because that's doing the work that the church is here to do. But our society makes that much harder, because that's not the message that we're getting outside of scripture and the church. Hopefully we're getting that message in the church. We may not be. We might be getting that opposite message.
It's true. So how do we walk that fine line, Suzie? I mean, I'm more the practical guy.
He doesn't have a philosophical bone in his body.
I do somewhere. But for me, I love having philosophical discussions, but I always want to end it with, okay, now what can I do?
Yeah.
So me as a 35-year-old pastor, what can I do to reverse this trend or help reverse this trend with people that I lead? Because I have a staff. Most of them are younger than me, and I have some that are older than me. So how do I effectively lead them in a way to where, number one, I don't get to the point of retirement and then I have nowhere to go and it's detrimental to the church, and then they don't live their whole lives in ministry and get to a point to where they have nothing either. So how do I as a leader effectively do that?
I think recognizing the work that they are doing and encouraging, celebrating success, but biblical success, right? So wherever someone's at in kind of their journey, their calling, to kind of recognize what they're doing and how the Spirit is working through them. Maybe that's the better way to put it, is to recognize what the Spirit is doing through them and how amazing it is that God is using them in that way. And rather than it being about what they are doing, it becomes about what God is doing through them. And, you know, and then that also allows you to be able to say, it's not me, it's God working through me. And God can also do this work through you and you and you, and kind of give that encouragement that builds up their confidence, because confidence is not a bad thing. You need to have confidence in your abilities, but it makes it more of a humble confidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm part of me, I hate to say it, I'm just a little bit overwhelmed by this thought of humility. It's been a journey that it's been something I've struggled with my whole life. I mean, I was a prideful, arrogant cuss. Life was about me.
Well, I think it's always a rub, Tim. I mean, because in order to be a pastor, you have to have some bravado to do the job, or you'll just be sitting in a corner crying yourself to sleep every night because of the way people treat you. So you have to balance the, walking in your calling, know the confidence of the leadership that God's called you to do. And on the other hand, you have to be humble while you do it. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
The scripture says that Moses was the humblest man who had ever lived at that point in time. Yeah. And when I think of that, you think, this is the guy who's leading millions. And he was leading in humility. Yeah. But part of that was, I'm not making every decision. There were people, I've got 10 guys.
But he didn't get to enter the promised land.
That's true.
Because he made a bad decision.
Because he had made an arrogant decision. Yeah. Yeah. But, I just, I'm really struck by this in our conversation. I did not expect to go that way. But, this has been good. So, Todd, what's your takeaway from our conversation this second episode?
Two things that Suzie said that I really like. You want to go out on a high note. I mean, we celebrate that in sports. Suzie mentioned Peyton Manning earlier. He went out on a high note, although albeit not winning for your Colts, but for the Broncos, but it's fine. And also we've got to celebrate biblical success. Sometimes as pastors, not all of our successes have to be in front of everybody. Sometimes especially as we age, especially as we get older, sometimes encouraging those that God is bringing into the spotlight and being that mentor, being that wisdom piece for them, sometimes that's an important calling as well. Yeah. And we push straight to the in front personality, and we forget that, there's behind the scenes people too that are just as important as the in front person.
That's good. That's pretty good there, Tado.
That's all I got today, Tim.
That's all I got right there. Thank you, Suzie, for being with us this time. We're going to come, everybody, if you're listening, we're going to come back next time. We're going to with Suzie again. And thank you so much. We
Thanks,
always
Susie.
love having you. One of these days, we're going to have to go to Abilene and at least have lunch or dinner or something with Susie, just so we can say we saw it, we've hung out.
Well, I'm in Abilene more than you because my
That's
father-in-law's
then
there.
it's on you, baby.
I thought about calling her. I was on the campus of ACU and I didn't even think about it.
Oh, that is offensive, dude.
I hurt.
I was there for the Pampered Chef conference and I'm, sorry. I didn't
That's
think about it.
brutal. He should not have confessed that, should he?
I'm sorry. I was showing somebody Jacob's Ladder there on campus. That's
Jacob's Dream. Yeah.
Jacob's Dream. Sorry. He's
He
building
is on a ladder.
Yeah. Sorry. I didn't know what it was called. I mean, it's Jacob's Ladder. That's all I knew. But yeah. So now I feel bad. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Well, I love to end these on a high note. So that's a high note.
Come back next time on the Advancement Podcast.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.